You really enjoy making me look incompetent in front of the team, don't you? Do you know who my father is? My last name should tell you everything you need to know.
I'm aware of your connection to the CEO, but that doesn't change my responsibility, Mr. Bryson.
Well, that settles it. My father will hear about this. Happy unemployment.
Bryson looked at Patrick directly, expecting him to understand that his father's name was the final word. Patrick remained seated, watching Bryson with a steady expression. He let the threat hang in the air. What Bryson didn't know was that by this time tomorrow, Patrick would become the one person Bryson's father couldn't overrule. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The report landed on Patrick's desk at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon. He read it once, then he read it again. Then he picked up his phone and sent Bryson Hallmark a calm, two-line message. Come see me before you leave today. There's something in your analysis we need to go over. Bryson arrived 11 minutes later, rolling up his sleeves like a man who'd been interrupted from something more important. He dropped into the chair across from Patrick without being invited to sit. What's up? Patrick turned his monitor so Bryson could see the screen. He kept his voice level and his hands still. Page 4. The competitor revenue projections. These numbers don't match any source I can verify. Not the industry reports, not the public filings, not anything in our internal database. Can you walk me through where these came from? Bryson glanced at the screen. I compiled them. From which sources? Various sources. I'm going to need specifics. This document goes into board prep materials. Every figure needs a citation. Bryson leaned back and crossed his arms. So you're saying my numbers are wrong? I'm saying they aren't sourced. That's a different issue. Board prep documents require verified data. That's firm policy, and it applies to everyone who contributes to them. Right. Bryson nodded slowly, the way people do when they've stopped listening. So you pulled me in here to tell me my work is bad. I pulled you in here privately so we could fix it together before it goes any further. That's me doing you a favor. Something shifted in Bryson's face. A favor. He said the word like it tasted wrong. You've had it in for me since day one. You know that, right? Every other manager here, they look at my work and they say, great job, keep it up. Then I come to your team and suddenly nothing I do is right. Patrick kept his expression neutral. Other managers may have different standards for intern deliverables. My standard is that data submitted to board materials has to be verified. I'd apply that rule to anyone sitting in that chair. That's not what this is. What do you think this is? You're trying to make me look incompetent. Bryson's voice was getting an edge to it now. Not loud yet, but sharp. You're sitting there with my report, acting like I fabricated something. I put time into that analysis. I understand you put time into it. The issue isn't your effort. It's that the figures on page 4 can't be traced to a real source. That's a factual problem with the document, not a judgment about you personally. You keep saying that. Bryson pointed at the screen. You keep saying it's not about me, but you called me in here. You're going through my work line by line. You're basically telling me I lied. I haven't used that word. You implied it. Bryson. Patrick pulled a printed copy of the firm's data sourcing policy from his desk drawer and placed it flat on the desk between them. He kept his tone even, almost quiet. This is the policy. Section 3, Paragraph 2. Every data point in a board document requires a primary source citation. I didn't write this rule. It was in place before either of us got here. I'm applying it to your submission the same way I'd apply it to anyone on this team. Bryson stared at the paper. Then he looked up. You printed that out. I print it out for every team member when this comes up. It's easier than reading it off a screen. No. Bryson shook his head, and now something uglier was moving behind his eyes. No, you printed that out for this meeting, for me, so you'd have something to put in front of me. So you could sit there and make it look official. He stood up slowly. I know what you're doing. You're building a case. You're documenting this right now, aren't you? I document all feedback conversations. That's standard practice on my team. For interns? For everyone. Bryson laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Do you know who my father is? Patrick looked at him steadily. He didn't blink. I do, he said, which is exactly why I'm making sure this gets handled correctly before it reaches him. The laugh died. Bryson straightened up to his full height and looked down at Patrick with something that had moved well past frustration, past embarrassment, and landed somewhere that felt a lot like a decision being made. You're going to regret this, Bryson said quietly. Patrick picked up his pen. I'll have the revised policy guidelines emailed to you tonight, he said. Get me the corrected citations by Friday morning. Bryson walked out without another word. Patrick wrote the date and time at the top of his notepad. Then he wrote down everything that had just been said, word for word, as close as he could remember it. He had a feeling he was going to need it. That feeling stayed with him through the weekend. On Monday morning, Patrick arrived at 7:45 as usual, reviewed his team's weekly deliverables, and sent Bryson a follow-up email. Professional, documented, time-stamped, asking again for the corrected citations. No response came. By Tuesday morning, Patrick had noted the missed deadline in his records and flagged it to Romina Flood in HR with a brief factual summary. Intern had submitted unsourced data to board prep materials, had been privately corrected per policy, had not followed up with required revisions. He wasn't building a case. He was doing his job. He had no way of knowing that on Monday evening, Bryson Hallmark had sat across from his father at dinner and described the entire situation differently. That he had used words like targeted and singled out and threatened by me. That Clifton Hallmark, a man who could read a balance sheet at 50 paces but had a catastrophic blind spot where his son was concerned, had listened to every word and believed all of it. Patrick didn't know any of that yet. He found out on Tuesday morning. The quarterly review had gone well. Patrick knew it before the numbers even hit the screen. 17 years at Hallmark Capital had given him a feel for these things. The way the room relaxed when the projections landed right. The way Warren Tillett nodded slowly at the revenue columns, like a man confirming what he already suspected. Patrick had built that quarter brick by brick. Late nights, early mornings, a team he'd trained himself. He walked out of the conference room at 10:14 feeling solid. Coffee in hand, jacket pressed. 17 years of earned ground beneath his feet. He made it halfway down the corridor before Clifton's assistant stepped into his path. Mr. Hallmark needs you. Right now. Her voice was too flat, too careful. Patrick looked past her toward the CEO's office at the end of the hall and saw Romina Flood already standing outside the glass door. HR. Nobody called HR to celebrate a good quarterly review. His stomach dropped, but his face stayed still. 17 years had taught him that, too. The office felt smaller than usual when he walked in. Clifton Hallmark stood behind his desk, with his arms crossed and his jaw set, silver hair catching the morning light. He didn't offer Patrick a seat. He didn't say, "Good morning." "We've received a formal complaint," Clifton said, "filed this morning. It concerns your conduct toward the intern program, specifically your treatment of Bryson." There it was. Patrick kept his voice even. "I'd like to see the complaint. You'll receive documentation through proper channels. I corrected a document with unverified data. I did it privately, I followed policy, and I documented everything. Whatever that complaint says, it is not an accurate account of what happened." Clifton's eyes went flat. "Your behavior has been described as disruptive, dismissive, and unprofessional. You singled out an intern, embarrassed him in front of his peers, and created a hostile environment. That isn't what happened. Security will escort you out. Your access is terminated effective immediately." Romina stepped forward from the wall. She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk and slid it toward Patrick without meeting his eyes. A termination letter. Patrick read it once, set it back down. "This is retaliation," he said quietly. "And you know it." Clifton said nothing. The security guard was already in the hallway with a cardboard box when Patrick came through the door. He took it. He kept his head up and his steps even as he walked back down the corridor. Past the same desks, the same faces. People looked up from their screens. Some looked away fast. Some just stared. And then he heard the laugh. It came from near the windows, loud, bright, and completely delighted. Bryson Hallmark stood in the open corridor in his burgundy suit, one hand pointing directly at Patrick, his whole face split open with a grin. 24 years old, performing for an audience. "That's what happens," Bryson announced to the cluster of interns nearby, making sure they were watching. "You don't know your place. You find out real fast." He pointed at the box in Patrick's hands and laughed harder. "Enjoy unemployment." Nobody on the floor said a word. Patrick stopped walking. He looked at Bryson Hallmark directly. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't clench his jaw. He looked at him the way you look at something that doesn't yet understand what it's just done to itself. Then he kept walking. The elevator was at the end of the hall. Patrick pressed the button. The doors opened. He stepped in and turned around. And for one moment, he could still see Bryson, still grinning, still pointing, still performing for the interns who didn't know whether to laugh or look away. The doors closed. Patrick stood in the elevator alone, holding the box, going down. The parking garage was quiet at that hour. Patrick sat in his car on level 2, engine off, the cardboard box on the passenger seat beside him. His termination letter was folded on top of his coffee mug, his framed desk photo face down on top of that. 17 years of a life, packed into a box that smelled like packing tape. He didn't move for a long time. His phone kept buzzing. Co-workers, a few friends from other departments. He watched the screen light up and go dark, light up and go dark, and he didn't touch it. He wasn't ready to talk yet. Talking meant making it real. And some part of him was still standing in that office, watching Romina slide that paper across the desk like she was passing him a napkin. He pressed his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes. 17 years. He thought about his first week at Hallmark Capital. 27 years old, freshly hired. So nervous, he'd ironed his shirt twice. Millie Oden had been his hiring manager then, a big-shouldered man with reading glasses and a blunt way of saying exactly what he meant. Millie had looked at Patrick's resume, looked at Patrick, and said, "You're going to have to be twice as good and half as loud. You understand what I'm telling you?" Patrick had understood. He'd spent 17 years being exactly that. And for what? His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it this time and stopped. The message was from a number he didn't recognize, a 312 area code he couldn't place. The text was short. "Don't talk to anyone yet. I have things you need to see. Don't sign anything." He stared at it. Then he called the number. It rang twice. When the voice came through, it was hushed, close to a whisper, like someone talking in a small space. "Mr. Delson, it's Madison. I'm in the bathroom on 34. Don't hang up." Madison Alberts, his junior analyst. 29 years old, 3 years on his team. Quiet in meetings, but never missed a thing. "Talk to me," Patrick said. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "I haven't done anything wrong and neither have you. But I have documentation, all of it legitimate, all of it from official firm systems, and you need to know what exists before you talk to anyone." "What kind of documentation?" "Bryson's original report is still sitting in the shared drive," she said. "His name on it. Timestamp showing when he uploaded it. The data on page 4, the unsourced competitor projections. They're still there, unedited. Nobody pulled it." Patrick sat up straighter. "I also have the email chain," she continued. "Your follow-up to him Friday morning, asking for the corrected citations. His non-response. All of it is in the firm's official email system with timestamps. And I have the written feedback form you filed through the intern review portal, the one that goes through HR automatically. You documented the policy violation the same day you spoke to him. That's in the system, too. That's all firm property, Patrick said. They could pull his access and wipe. They can't wipe the email server logs, she said. And the shared drive version history is automatic. Every upload, every edit, every deletion gets logged with a timestamp and a username. Even if someone deletes the file today, the version history record stays. I already did a screen capture of the current file state and the version log and sent it to my personal email before I came to the bathroom. That was smart. That was very smart. There's something else, Madison said. Her voice got quieter. This morning, the hallway, when you were leaving. She paused. 7 people saw what Bryson did. 7. I have their names. 3 of them came to me within an hour and said they'd be willing to say what they witnessed. They were disturbed by it, Mr. Delson. They want to go on record. Patrick closed his eyes for a moment. I went to Romina, Madison added. Before they called you in, I told her the timeline didn't match the complaint, that the documented record contradicted what Bryson reported. What did she say? A pause. She told me to stay out of it. The garage was very quiet. Somewhere on a lower level, a car engine echoed and faded. Mr. Delson. Madison's voice was careful now, deliberate. Whatever they send you to sign, severance paperwork, an NDA, anything, don't sign it yet, okay? Just don't sign anything tonight. Okay, Patrick said. Don't post anything publicly. Don't call anyone at the firm except me. Not yet. Okay. A beat of silence. I'm sorry this happened, she said. You didn't deserve it. He didn't say anything for a moment. The words landed somewhere deep, and he let them sit there. Get me the names of those 7 witnesses, he said finally. In writing, to your personal email. And send yourself that version history log again. Make sure you have a second copy. Already sent both, she said. Before I called you. He almost smiled. Almost. Good, he said. Go back to your desk. Act normal. I'll be in touch. He ended the call and sat in the dark for another minute, the phone warm in his hand. Then he dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang 3 times. Patrick. Millie's voice was deep and steady, the same as it had always been. Talk to me. I need your advice, Patrick said. Tonight, if you can. Come now, Millie said. I'll put food on. Patrick started the car. Millie Oden lived 20 minutes from downtown in a red brick house with a front porch light that was always on. Patrick had been to that porch more times than he could count. For advice, for clarity, for the particular kind of conversation that only happens between a man who has been somewhere and a man who is trying to get there. Millie had hired Patrick at 27, had mentored him through every promotion, had retired 6 years ago with a firm handshake and a warning. The higher you go, the lonelier it gets. Find people worth trusting and hold on to them. Patrick parked at the curb and sat for a moment before going in. The drive had helped. 20 minutes of highway noise and streetlights had moved him from numb to something sharper. Anger, maybe, or focus. With Patrick, the two had always felt similar. He grabbed the box from the passenger seat, then thought better of it, and left it in the car. He wasn't ready to carry it into someone else's house. It felt like surrender. He knocked once. Millie opened the door before the second knock, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a dish towel over his shoulder. Come in, he said. No fuss, no dramatic reaction to the look on Patrick's face. Just, come in. They sat at the kitchen table. Millie put a plate in front of Patrick. Rice, chicken, something that smelled like his wife's recipe, even though his wife had been gone 4 years now. Patrick didn't ask. He just ate, because Millie had put it there, and because his body apparently needed it, whether his mind agreed or not. He told the whole story while he ate. The Thursday correction meeting with Bryson, the policy document, Bryson's threat on the way out, the weekend silence. The Monday follow-up email Bryson never answered. the HR flag Patrick filed through proper channels. Then, Tuesday morning, the quarterly review that went perfectly, the assistant intercepting him in the corridor, Romina and her blank face, and that single sheet of paper. Bryson in the hallway. The box. Enjoy unemployment. Millie listened to all of it without interrupting once. He refilled Patrick's water glass halfway through and said nothing. When Patrick finished, Millie took off his reading glasses and set them on the table. "Tell me about Madison," he said. Patrick walked him through the call. The firm's shared drive with Bryson's falsified report still intact, the email chain with timestamps, the intern review portal flag Patrick himself had filed, the 7 witnesses in the hallway. 3 of them already willing to give formal statements. Millie nodded slowly through all of it. "She went to Romina first," Patrick said, "before they called me in. Told her the documented record didn't match the complaint. And Romina told her to stay out of it." "Yes." Millie was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table, then back at Patrick. "Romina knew," he said. It wasn't a question. She had to. Another silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. "All right," Millie said. "Here's what I know about situations like this one." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Clifton Hallmark didn't just fire you because his son complained. Men like Clifton don't move that fast on a whim. He moved that fast because somewhere in that firm there is something he doesn't want examined. You correcting that intern that shone a light where Clifton needed it dark. You understand what I'm saying?" Patrick looked at him. "The Division X files." Millie raised an eyebrow. "Bryson's analysis," Patrick said slowly. "The falsified projections. Those numbers weren't random. They were formatted to match the Division X performance reports. I noticed it when I read the document, but I didn't follow that thought all the way. Follow it now. Clifton has been positioning Bryson for something in that portfolio. If Bryson's fabricated numbers made it into board prep materials, they could have been used to justify an appointment that wouldn't survive real scrutiny." Patrick sat back. "That's not just nepotism. That's potentially fraudulent representation to the board." Millie said nothing. He just watched Patrick put it together. "I need to call Warren Tillett," Patrick said. "Yes, you do. He'll take my call. 3 years ago, I saved an acquisition deal he'd nearly written off. He owes me one." "Don't frame it as a favor," Millie said. "Frame it as a liability, because that's what it is." He tapped the table once. "But not tonight. Tonight you go home. You eat again if Pauline feeds you. You sleep." He looked at Patrick steadily. "You're going to need to be very sharp for what comes next. Tired men make mistakes." Patrick pushed back from the table and stood. "Thank you," he said. Millie waved it off. "That's what I'm here for." Patrick drove home through quiet streets. Pauline was awake at the kitchen table when he walked in, her reading glasses on, a cup of tea gone cold beside her laptop. She looked up at his face and didn't ask how it went. She just stood up, crossed the kitchen, and held on to him for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down. I'll heat something up." And because she was Pauline, that was enough. Patrick slept. Not well. He was up twice, lying in the dark staring at the ceiling while Pauline breathed steadily beside him. But he slept. And when the alarm didn't go off at 6:15 the way it had for 17 years, and he realized he had nowhere to be, the feeling that moved through him was something he hadn't expected. Not relief. Not grief either. Rage. Clean, cold, focused rage. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that gets things done. He was at the kitchen table by 6:45 with his laptop open and a legal pad beside it. He spent an hour writing out everything he remembered from the Thursday correction meeting with Bryson. Every word he could recall, the sequence of the conversation, what he'd said, what Bryson had said, what time it started, and approximately what time it ended. He documented the Friday follow-up email, the missed deadline, the HR flag he'd filed through the intern review portal. He wrote it all down longhand, dated it, and signed it. Then he opened his personal email and found Madison's message from the night before. She had sent everything, screenshots of the shared drive version history showing Bryson's original upload with the falsified data intact, the complete email chain with server timestamps, and a typed list of 7 witness names with a note beside 3 of them, willing to provide formal statements. Patrick read through it twice. Then he printed everything, stacked it neatly, and put it in a folder. By 7:15, he had his phone in his hand. Warren Tillett answered on the second ring. Not his assistant. Not a voicemail. Tillett himself, with the particular clipped efficiency of a man who had been awake since 5 and expected the same of the world. "Patrick Delson," Tillett said. "I heard what happened yesterday. Then you know why I'm calling." "I'm listening." Patrick didn't lead with the discrimination angle. Millie had been clear about that. Lead with what Tillett cares about most, which is the firm. Lead with fiduciary duty. Lead with liability. He laid it out in order. The intern submission containing unsourced and unverifiable competitor data, formatted in a way that mirrored the Division X performance reports. The private, policy-compliant correction meeting. The documented follow-up. The HR flag filed through official channels the same day. Then the complaint, filed the morning after Bryson failed to meet the correction deadline, and the termination that followed within hours, without investigation, without the standard review period that firm policy required. Then he said, "The intern is Bryson Hallmark, Clifton's son." Silence on the line. "I'm emailing you the documentation package right now," Patrick said. While we're on the phone, he heard Tillett open something. A pause, then another, longer pause. "These projections," Tillett said slowly, "on page 4 of the intern submission. They don't exist in any verifiable source. But the format." Tillett's voice had changed, sharper now, more careful. "This formatting matches our internal Division X template. I noticed that when I first read the document." Another silence. This one lasted long enough that Patrick counted it. "Patrick." Tillett's voice was measured, deliberate. "I need you to say nothing publicly. Not to the press, not on any platform, not to anyone inside the firm beyond who already knows. Can you do that?" "Yes. I'm going to make some calls. You'll hear from me by noon." He heard from Tillett at 11:42. The board's general counsel had reviewed the documentation package by 9. By 10, she had flagged it in writing as a severe legal and regulatory exposure. Wrongful termination without standard review period, potential racial discrimination evidenced by the pattern of events, and the deeper concern about the Division X projections and what they implied about Clifton's plans for his son. By 11, Tillett had spoken privately with 4 board members. By noon, Tillett called back and told Patrick the board was convening an emergency governance session that afternoon. 48 hours later, Clifton Hallmark's operational authority was suspended pending a full governance investigation. The board needed someone with executive authority to manage daily operations while the process ran its course. Someone who knew the firm. Someone the general counsel had no objections to. Someone, Tillett said carefully, who had just demonstrated exactly the kind of principled documentation discipline the firm was going to need in the weeks ahead. They wanted Patrick Delson, Interim Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. Patrick sat at his kitchen table and held the phone against his ear for a moment after Tillett finished speaking. Through the window, the neighbor's kid was shooting hoops in the driveway across the street, the ball bouncing in a steady rhythm against the concrete. He called Pauline at her school. She picked up between classes. "I start tomorrow," he said. "Different title." "How different?" "They need someone to run the company while they investigate my old boss." A pause. Then she laughed. A real, full, unguarded laugh that he hadn't heard in 2 days. "Get your suits pressed," she said. He was already moving toward the closet. Patrick arrived at 7:50 the next morning. Not a treat. Not 7:45. 7:50, deliberate, unhurried, exactly the kind of arrival that said he had nowhere else to be and nothing to prove. He wore the charcoal suit, the one Pauline called his serious suit, the one he'd bought for the presentation that saved Warren Tillett's acquisition deal 3 years ago. The security guard at the front desk, the same man who had handed Patrick the cardboard box 48 hours earlier, stood a little straighter when Patrick pushed through the glass doors. "Good morning, Mr. Delson." "Good morning, Justin," Patrick said, and kept walking. Odette Winter was waiting at the elevator bank on the 34th floor. 61 years old, 22 years at Hallmark Capital. The kind of executive assistant who knew where every body was buried and had the good sense never to say so out loud. She had worked for Patrick for 6 of those years, had reorganized his calendar twice, had quietly corrected his meeting prep materials without being asked, and had once, without a word of explanation, placed a printed copy of the firm's harassment policy on Clifton Hallmark's assistant's desk during a particularly tense period 3 years prior. She was holding his coffee, black, 2 sugars, and a leather portfolio with the day's schedule already inside. "I reorganized your calendar," she said, as the elevator opened. "Your 9 o'clock is a department head briefing. I've confirmed all 7 leads. Your 10:30 is a call with outside counsel. Afternoon is blocked for Division X file review." She paused. "I also moved into the outer office of the executive suite this morning. I hope that's all right." "It's more than all right," Patrick said. She nodded once, as if that settled it, and fell into step beside him. The 34th floor watched him walk to the corner suite. Not loudly, not with whispers or pointed stares, just that particular quality of stillness that falls over an open office when something significant is happening, and everyone knows it. Heads lifted from screens. Eyes tracked his path down the corridor. Patrick felt it, and kept his pace steady. He passed the office where he'd been handed his termination letter 48 hours ago. He didn't look at it. The corner suite was Clifton's office, had been Clifton's office for 19 years, with Clifton's mahogany desk, and Clifton's view of the city, and Clifton's name in the directory outside the door. That name had been covered with a temporary placard overnight. It read, P. Delson, Interim COO. Patrick set his briefcase down, hung his jacket, and sat. The view from the corner was different than he'd expected. He'd been in this office dozens of times for meetings, but sitting behind the desk was another thing entirely. The city spread out below in every direction, glass towers and morning light, and the distant gray line of the lake. He took exactly 5 seconds to look at it. Then he opened the portfolio and got to work. His first 3 official acts took less than 30 minutes. He formally suspended Bryson Hallmark's intern credentials, all system access, all building badge permissions, all network logins. He put the suspension in writing, routed it through outside counsel, and copied the board's general counsel on the notification. Then he submitted a formal written request to the firm's IT and records departments for full access to the Division X portfolio files. Every projection, every report, every internal memo generated in the last 18 months. He noted in the request that the files were potentially material to the ongoing governance review, and requested that no alterations or deletions be made to any Division X document pending the investigation. Then he drafted the all-staff department head briefing agenda for 9 o'clock. At 8:55, Odette appeared in the doorway. "They're all in the conference room." "Good," Patrick said. He picked up his portfolio and his pen. "Let's go." Bryson Hallmark arrived at the building at 9:20. He came through the front doors in his burgundy suit, with his intern badge in his hand, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who expected the world to step aside. He held his badge to the elevator panel. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. The front desk attendant, a young woman named Carla, who had watched the hallway scene 2 days ago and had not forgotten it, looked up from her monitor. "Mr. Hallmark," she said carefully, "your access credentials have been suspended pending the governance review. You'll need authorization from the interim COO to enter." Bryson stared at her. "The interim COO," he repeated. "Yes, sir." He stood in the lobby for a long moment, badge still in his hand, the elevator doors sliding open and closed for other people while he processed what he'd just been told. Then he took out his phone and called his father. Clifton picked up on the third ring. Bryson told him what had just happened, his voice climbing with each sentence. When he finished, there was a silence on Clifton's end that lasted long enough to mean something. "I'll handle it," Clifton said. But for the first time since this started, Bryson wasn't sure his father actually could. Clifton Hallmark did not go to the office that day. He went to his club instead, a quiet, wood-paneled place on the 42nd floor of a building 4 blocks from Hallmark Capital, the kind of establishment where memberships were inherited, and the staff learned your drink order on the first visit and never forgot it. He sat in a private booth near the window with his phone on the table and a glass of water he hadn't touched, and made calls. He started with Justin Foss. Foss was 63, a board member for 9 years, and one of 3 people on the Hallmark Capital Board, whose consulting arrangements ran directly through a subsidiary that Clifton personally controlled. That arrangement had never been discussed openly. It didn't need to be. Both men understood what it meant. This governance session wasn't properly convened, Clifton said. The quorum requirement for an emergency appointment wasn't met. "You know that. I'd need to review the procedural record," Foss said carefully. "I need you to raise the objection formally at the next session. Get it on the record that the appointment is procedurally invalid." A pause. "I can look into it." Clifton moved on. He called Emery Waverly next, then Howard Bradford. He delivered the same message to each: the quorum argument, the procedural challenge, the suggestion that the emergency session had been rushed through by Tillett, acting on incomplete information. By 11 o'clock, all 3 had indicated, in the careful language of people who understood which side their bread was buttered on, that they would raise the objection. Clifton ordered coffee and stared out at the city. The story appeared online at 2:17 that afternoon. It ran in a financial trade publication called Capital Current, a small but widely read outlet that covered mid-market financial firms with the particular relish of a publication that survived on insider tips. The headline was precise and devastating. "Hallmark Capital Governance Questions Mount, as ousted manager takes interim role." The article was 3 paragraphs. It didn't name its source. It described Patrick as an ousted regional manager with a pending discrimination grievance who had been installed in an interim executive role by sympathetic board members following an internal dispute. It raised questions about the unusual speed of the appointment and whether the move reflected sound governance or internal political maneuvering. It noted that Clifton Hallmark, the firm's founder and CEO, had been sidelined pending an unspecified review. The framing was surgical. Every word was technically defensible, and the effect was exactly what it was designed to be. It didn't say Patrick was wrong. It said he was questionable. It planted the seed that his presence in that corner office was not earned authority, but political leverage. It repositioned him in the reader's mind from executive to aggrieved activist, from competent to controversial. Patrick read it at his desk at 2:45, between the Division X file review and a call with outside counsel. Odette had printed it and left it on his desk without comment, which was her way of saying, "You need to see this." He read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. He would need to remember exactly what was said, and when. Bryson ran a quieter operation, but a nastier one. Without building access, he worked through his phone. Texts to junior staff he'd befriended during the internship, messages to the other interns, a few carefully worded conversations with people on the lower floors who didn't know the full story, and were therefore still shapeable. His message was consistent. Patrick had targeted him from the beginning, had singled him out, had been threatened by a young, talented outsider, and had used his managerial authority to push him out before he could prove himself. The complaint Bryson filed, in this version of events, was simply the truth finally being told. He didn't say anything that could be screenshotted and used against him. He was smarter than he sometimes appeared. The comments were verbal, conversational, the kind of thing that spreads through a workplace like smoke. You can smell it everywhere, but you can never quite find the source. By late afternoon, Madison Alberts noticed it. 2 junior analysts had stopped making eye contact with her in the break room. A paralegal who had always said good morning walked past her desk without looking up. Small things. The kind of things that meant the narrative was moving. She typed a brief message to Patrick's new executive email. Bryson is working the floor. Nothing documented yet, just the pattern. Wanted you to know. Patrick read it, typed back 2 words, I see, and returned to the Division X files. He had expected this. What Clifton and Bryson had not yet understood was that Patrick Delson had spent 17 years being underestimated in this building. He was very good at it. The note arrived on a Wednesday morning. Not an email, not a calendar invite through the firm's system. A handwritten note on plain white paper, folded once, delivered by Romina Flood's assistant to Odette's desk at 8:40 a.m. Odette brought it to Patrick without opening it, which told him she already knew something about what it might contain. He unfolded it. I need to speak with you privately, not through firm channels. Today, if possible. R.F. Patrick looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Odette. Small conference room, he said. 11 o'clock. I want you in the room. Odette nodded and went to make it happen. Romina Flood arrived 3 minutes early. Patrick had seen her in the hallways twice since returning to the building, and both times she had looked away first. Not with hostility, but with the particular avoidance of a person who is carrying something heavy and is afraid of what will happen when they put it down. She was 51 years old and had been head of HR at Hallmark Capital for 8 years. In Patrick's experience, she was neither cruel nor courageous. She was a woman who had spent her career threading the needle between what was right and what was safe, and she had gotten very good at staying on the safe side. She sat across from him at the small conference table. Odette sat to Patrick's left, with a legal pad. Romina looked at Odette, then back at Patrick. She stays, Patrick said quietly. She's here as a witness. Nothing leaves this room without your consent, but I'm not having this conversation without documentation. Romina nodded. She set her hands flat on the table and took a breath. I want to start by saying that what I did, signing that termination letter, was wrong, she said. I knew it was wrong when I did it. I want you to know that I told him so. Patrick said nothing. He let her talk. The morning of your termination, before Clifton called you in, I went to his office. Her voice was steady but effortful, the way a voice gets when someone has rehearsed what they're about to say, but is still afraid of saying it. I told him that Bryson's complaint did not meet our threshold for immediate termination. Our policy requires a minimum 3-day investigation period for any complaint involving a manager at your level. I told him we needed to follow that process. What did he say? Romina's jaw tightened slightly. He told me to process the termination as submitted. And you did. He's the CEO, she said. Then, quieter, he was the CEO. What else? Patrick said. He could tell there was more. He'd been reading people for 17 years. Romina reached into the folder she'd brought and removed a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the table toward him. It was a handwritten page, her own handwriting, Patrick could tell, neat and compressed, with a date at the top, the morning of his termination. Below the date were 5 lines of notes, and at the bottom, set apart from the rest and underlined once, was a direct quote. Patrick read it. The optics of Bryson being corrected by someone like Patrick are a problem for this firm's culture. The room was very quiet. Patrick read the line again. He set the paper down on the table and looked at it for a moment longer, and then he looked up at Romina. He said this to you directly. In his office, that morning at approximately 8:15 a.m. I wrote it down as soon as I left, word for word. She nodded at the paper. The date and time are at the top. That's my handwriting. I kept it at home. Someone like Patrick. 4 words. Clifton Hallmark had stood in his corner office on a Tuesday morning, looked his head of HR in the eye, and said someone like Patrick. and had apparently not paused to consider that Romina might write it down. "Why are you telling me this now?" Patrick said. Romina looked at her hands. "Because Clifton's attorney contacted me last week through back channels. The message was clear. If the investigation goes badly for Clifton, he intends to claim that I processed your termination outside my authority, that I acted unilaterally." She looked up. "He is going to make me the person who fired you without his knowledge." Patrick held her gaze. "And you're not willing to carry that." "I did something wrong," she said. "I'm not willing to carry his wrong on top of mine." Odette had been writing steadily throughout. She signed the bottom of her notes with the date and time and set the pen down. Patrick picked up the page with Romina's handwriting and held it carefully at the edges. The way you hold something you know is important. The way you hold evidence. Someone like Patrick. He slid it into his folder. "Thank you," he said, "for coming forward." Romina stood, gathered her things, and left without another word. When the door closed, Odette looked at the folder in Patrick's hands and said quietly, "He actually said that out loud." "Yes," Patrick said. "He did." He stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked back to the corner office. He had a board hearing to prepare for. The boardroom at Hallmark Capital sat on the 35th floor. It was a long, serious room. 12 leather chairs around an oval table, a wall of windows on the north side, the firm's founding charter framed on the south wall beside a portrait of Clifton Hallmark that had been painted sometime in the early 2000s, when he was thinner and more optimistic. Patrick had presented in this room 40, maybe 50 times. He knew which chair squeaked, which window let in a draft in winter, which board members needed the font larger on their printed materials. He had never sat at the head of the table before. He sat there now. The hearing began at 9 o'clock sharp. All 11 board members were present. Warren Tillett sat to Patrick's immediate left, which was either a gesture of support or a statement of position. Probably both. Clifton's 3 allies, Justin Foss, Emery Waverly, and Howard Bradford, sat together on the far side of the table, which was either coincidence or a declaration, also probably both. Patrick's attorney, a measured woman named Constance Aberley, who spoke in complete sentences and never raised her voice, sat to his right. Odette and Madison were positioned along the wall behind him, not at the table but present, visible, and documented. Clifton was not in the room. His personal attorney, a silver-haired man named Desmond Ray, sat in the observer's chair along the wall and watched everything with the careful stillness of a man being paid by the hour. Patrick opened his folder and began. He presented the evidence in sequence, no drama, no speeches, just the documented record, laid out in chronological order, piece by piece. First, Bryson's original market analysis, retrieved from the firm's shared drive version history. Patrick walked the board through page 4, the competitor revenue projections that matched no verifiable source in any industry database, public filing, or internal record. He showed them the upload timestamp, the username, the unedited file exactly as Bryson had submitted it. Second, Patrick's own written correction, sent to Bryson privately the same day via the firm's internal messaging system, explaining the policy violation and requesting corrected citations by Friday morning. Time-stamped, professional, documented. Third, the email chain. Patrick's Friday morning follow-up. Bryson's non-response. The missed deadline logged in the firm's system. Fourth, the intern performance flag Patrick had filed through the official HR portal the same day as the correction meeting. Before the complaint, before the termination, before any of it. The flag documented the policy violation through proper channels, exactly as firm policy required. Fifth, the list of 7 eyewitnesses to Bryson's hallway conduct on the morning of the termination. 3 signed formal statements, obtained by Madison through the firm's official witness statement process, describing in consistent detail what Bryson said and how he said it. Sixth, Romina's page. Patrick placed it on the table and read it aloud. He read the date, the time, and then the underlined line at the bottom. The optics of Bryson being corrected by someone like Patrick are a problem for this firm's culture. The room changed when he read that line. Not loudly. It wasn't a gasp or a murmur. It was the quality of silence that shifts. The kind that means something has landed somewhere it cannot be taken back from. Geraldine Adam, sitting 4 chairs down on the left side, closed her eyes for a moment. Howard Bradford, one of Clifton's 3 allies, looked at the table. Constance Aberley then presented the Division X materials. This was where the room went from uncomfortable to alarmed. The Division X files, 18 months of internal portfolio projections, showed a clear pattern. Falsified performance metrics, formatted to make a struggling division look viable. Internal memos, traced through document metadata to Clifton's office, positioning Bryson for an oversight role in that division. And, at the center of it, if those metrics had made it into board reporting materials, Hallmark Capital would have been presenting materially inaccurate data to its investors. That was not an HR problem. That was an SEC problem. Justin Foss had gone very still. Emery Waverly was whispering to the attorney beside her. Howard Bradford had stopped looking at the table and was now staring at the middle distance with the expression of a man recalculating several things at once. Tillett called a recess at 11:20. Patrick was standing at the window in the corridor when Geraldine Adam found him. 11 years on the board. Silver hair, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who had survived a long time in rooms that weren't built for her and had developed very accurate instincts as a result. She stood beside him at the window and looked out at the city. 2 of Clifton's 3 are ready to move, she said quietly. Not because they want to, because they don't have a choice. She paused. The vote will happen tomorrow morning. You should be prepared. Patrick looked out at the city. The morning light was flat and bright across the glass towers. I'll be ready, he said. Geraldine nodded once and walked back toward the boardroom. Patrick stood at the window a moment longer. Then he took out his phone and called Pauline. It looks like it's almost over, he said. A beat of silence. Then her voice, warm and steady. Come home and sleep. You've earned it. For the first time in days, he believed her. Patrick was home by 7. Pauline had made dinner, the real kind, not the reheated kind, and they sat at the table together for the first time in what felt like weeks. She asked him to tell her how the hearing went, and he did, all of it, from the moment he sat at the head of the table to Geraldine Adam finding him at the corridor window. Pauline listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting, her fork set down after the first few minutes because she wasn't eating anymore, just hearing him. When he finished, she said, Geraldine Adam. She's been on that board 11 years. Yes. And she came to you. Yes. Pauline picked her fork back up. Then it's done, she said simply, the way she said things when she had decided they were true. They cleaned up together. Patrick was in bed by 9:30, earlier than he'd slept in years, and for the first time since the parking garage, the ceiling didn't keep him awake. He was deeply asleep when his phone rang. The screen said 11:47 p.m. The name said Warren Tillett. Patrick was upright before the second ring. The fog of sleep gone instantly the way it goes when your body understands, before your mind does, that something is wrong. Tillett, he said. Patrick. Tillett's voice was controlled, but underneath the control was something Patrick had never heard from him before. Something close to dread. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm while I do. Go ahead. Outside counsel received a document package 2 hours ago. Anonymous submission. It contains a series of emails, apparently sent from your work account, spanning the past 11 months. The content of these emails suggests that you have been selectively withholding Division X performance data from the board while sharing proprietary firm information with a competing investment group. The words arrived one at a time, like stones dropped into still water. Patrick said nothing. The emails are detailed, Tillett continued. They reference specific meetings, specific data sets, specific dates. They're written in a style consistent with your professional communication. Our outside counsel reviewed them at 10 o'clock tonight and determined that she is legally obligated to halt the governance hearing pending a full review of the new materials. They're fabricated, Patrick said. I believe you. Warren, I believe you, Patrick. But I am not the one who needs to be convinced right now. Outside counsel has a legal obligation. The hearing is paused. That is where we are tonight. Patrick stood up from the bed and walked to the window. The street below was empty and quiet, orange under the street lights. Pauline was sitting up behind him, watching his back, reading the situation from the set of his shoulders. How sophisticated are they? Patrick said. Sophisticated enough that they went to outside counsel at 10 at night instead of waiting until morning, Tillett said. They replicate your writing patterns. They reference real meetings and accurate internal data points. The timestamps appear authentic at first examination. A pause. Someone put time into this. Someone with access to my writing style and enough internal data to make the details credible. Yes, that's a short list of people, Warren. Tillett said nothing, which meant he had already thought about that. What happens tomorrow? Patrick said. The governance vote is postponed pending review of the new materials. Outside counsel will determine the scope and timeline of the review in the morning. Another pause. I want to be direct with you. Clifton's 3 allies now have procedural cover to delay the vote indefinitely while this is reviewed. Every day the vote is delayed is a day Clifton's people are working the situation. After he hung up, Patrick stood at the window a moment longer. Then his phone buzzed with a news alert. One outlet. Then, 2 minutes later, a second one. Both running variations of the same story. Hallmark Capital interim COO, under investigation for potential data breach and breach of fiduciary duty. The language was precise. The timing, midnight, the same night as the document submission to outside counsel, was not a coincidence. Someone had fed both outlets the story before the documents were even fully reviewed. Then his phone buzzed one more time. A social media notification. Bryson Hallmark's public account. A single post. 3 words with a period at the end. Funny how things come around. Patrick turned his phone face down on the windowsill. Pauline appeared beside him. She didn't offer comfort yet. She looked at his face, then out the window, then back at him. And then she asked the only question that mattered. Who built those emails? She said quietly. And how did they do it? Patrick looked at her. The question cut through everything, through the anger and the exhaustion and the vertigo of watching the ground disappear again. It was the right question. Not why and not what now, but how. Because how had an answer. And answers could be found. I don't know yet, he said. But I'm going to. Patrick was at the kitchen table at 5 a.m. He hadn't gone back to sleep. After Pauline's question, they had sat together at the window for a while, talking through what they knew and what they didn't, and then Pauline had gone back to bed because she had a school to run in the morning, and she was the kind of woman who understood that falling apart was a luxury neither of them could afford. Patrick had tried to follow her. He'd lain in the dark for 40 minutes, staring at the ceiling, his mind moving too fast for sleep to catch it. So he got up. He made coffee, opened his legal pad, and wrote Pauline's question at the top of a fresh page. Who built those emails? And how? He stared at it for a while. Then he started writing underneath it. Everything he knew about the fabricated emails, in order. What Tillett had described. The sophistication of the construction. The accurate internal references. The writing style. The timestamps that had fooled outside counsel at first examination. The timing of the news stories fed to 2 outlets simultaneously before the documents had even been fully reviewed. By the time he finished writing, his coffee was cold. He read back through what he'd written. Then he picked up his phone and called Millie. Millie answered on the second ring. It was 5:32 a.m. Patrick hadn't considered until that moment that Millie was 67 years old and might be asleep. I've been up since 4, Millie said, before Patrick could apologize. I saw the news alerts. Talk to me. Patrick walked him through everything till it had said. The document package, the midnight submission to outside counsel, the postponed vote, the news stories. He read Millie the description of the emails, the accurate internal data references, the replicated writing patterns, the authentic-looking timestamps. Millie was quiet for a moment. "I've seen this before," he said. "Not at Hallmark. Years before. A firm in Cincinnati. Mid-90s. A VP tried to use fabricated internal memos to frame a colleague during an acquisition dispute." He paused. "You know what brought him down?" "The IT logs," Patrick said. A beat of silence. "You already know where this is going," Millie said. "I know that email metadata can be falsified at the surface level. But the server-side authentication logs, the records of which credentials were active, at which terminal, at what exact time, those are written into the infrastructure itself. You can't alter them without leaving a different kind of trail." "That's right," Millie said. "Email fabrication is a surface job. It can fool a lawyer reading a printout. It cannot fool a forensic IT audit of the actual server infrastructure. The routing headers, the authentication records, the workstation logs, those exist in layers that a regular user cannot touch." He paused. "But here's what matters. You need to get to your IT infrastructure director before Clifton's people do. Once someone with the right access starts selectively pulling server logs, the chain of custody gets complicated. Clifton has been suspended from operational authority," Patrick said. "He shouldn't have access to—" "Shouldn't," Millie said, and let the word sit there. Patrick understood. Suspended from operational authority meant Clifton couldn't make business decisions. It didn't mean his relationships inside the firm had evaporated overnight. Men like Clifton had loyalties everywhere, built over 19 years. Loyalties that didn't require an official title to activate. "I need someone in IT who is completely outside Clifton's network," Patrick said. "Do you have someone like that?" Patrick thought for a moment. Then he thought about Madison, and remembered something she had mentioned during her first week on his team, 3 years ago, in a casual conversation about her career path before analysis. She had spent 3 years in IT security before moving to finance. She had mentioned once a name. He ended the call with Millie and immediately dialed Madison. She answered on the first ring. She had seen the news alerts, too. "I need you to think back," Patrick said. "Your time in IT security. Do you still have a relationship with anyone in the firm's infrastructure department? Someone senior? Someone who operates independently?" A pause. "Jonathan Brown," she said. "Senior Systems Administrator. He's been here 12 years. He doesn't report to any executive. His oversight runs directly through outside counsel and the board's audit committee. He's the most politically independent person in the building." Another pause. "And he is extremely particular about the integrity of the firm's systems. If someone used those systems to fabricate evidence, that's going to make him angry on a professional level. Can you reach him directly?" "Give me 10 minutes." She called back in 8. Jonathan Brown had agreed to begin a full authentication audit of the disputed emails immediately, under the formal authority of outside counsel, before the business day began. Patrick set his phone down and looked at the legal pad, at the question Pauline had asked at midnight. Who built those emails, and how? By morning, they were going to have an answer. Jonathan Brown did not look like a man who would save Patrick Delson's career. He was slight and quiet, somewhere in his mid-40s, with close-cropped hair and the kind of careful stillness that belongs to people who spend most of their working hours paying attention to things other people don't notice. He wore the same thing every day: dark slacks, a gray button-down, no tie, and he spoke in complete sentences at a pace that suggested he had never in his life said anything he didn't mean. Patrick had interacted with him maybe 4 times in 17 years. Brief, functional exchanges about system access and data permissions. Jonathan was not a man who attended firm social events or lingered in the break room. He existed in the infrastructure of Hallmark Capital the way a load-bearing wall exists in a building, essential, unnoticed, and absolutely not to be interfered with. Madison had reached him at 6:15 a.m. By 6:45, he was at his workstation on the 32nd floor with his access credentials open and his authentication audit software running. He had not needed to be persuaded. Madison had explained the situation in 2 minutes, and Jonathan had said, in a voice that was almost completely flat, "Someone used this firm's infrastructure to fabricate evidence. That is a problem I would like to address." Patrick arrived at the building at 7:30 and went directly to the 32nd floor. Jonathan did not look up when Patrick entered. He was already deep in the server logs, 3 monitors running different views of the same authentication data, his fingers moving across the keyboard in short, precise bursts. A 4th monitor displayed a timeline visualization Patrick didn't fully understand, but which appeared to map network activity against timestamps. "Sit," Jonathan said, without looking up. "I'll explain what I'm seeing when I have something to explain." Patrick sat. He had brought coffee for both of them. Jonathan's went untouched. Madison arrived 8 minutes later and positioned herself to Jonathan's left, close enough to follow the screens. She and Jonathan exchanged a brief nod, the nod of 2 people who speak the same technical language and have dispensed with small talk as a matter of shared principle. The room was quiet except for keyboard clicks and the low hum of the server cooling system. Patrick waited. At 8:14, Jonathan stopped typing. He leaned back in his chair, looked at his center monitor for a long moment, and then turned to face Patrick for the first time since he'd arrived. "The emails are fabricated," he said. "I can prove it." He turned back to the screen and walked Patrick through it in methodical order, the way a man explains something he finds both technically interesting and personally offensive. The disputed emails, all 17 of them spanning 11 months, showed normal surface metadata when viewed in a standard email client. Sender address, timestamps, subject lines, message threading. All of it appeared consistent with Patrick's genuine email history. But the server-side authentication logs told a different story. Every genuine email sent from Patrick's account over the past 3 years showed a consistent authentication signature, the same device credentials, the same network access pattern, the same login sequence that Patrick used every morning when he arrived at his desk. Routine, repetitive, unmistakable. The 17 disputed emails showed a completely different authentication signature. They were generated from a single session, not Patrick's regular workstation, not his laptop, not any device registered to his credentials in the firm's system. They came from a guest terminal, a shared access workstation on the 34th floor's executive suite corridor, logged in under a separate set of credentials that had been used to access Patrick's email account without authorization. "Someone logged into a guest terminal," Jonathan said, "accessed your email account from that terminal and generated these messages from there. They knew enough about email formatting to make the surface metadata look right. They did not know, or did not consider, that the server authentication logs record not just what was sent, but from where, from which device, and under which credential set." He paused. "Those logs cannot be altered retroactively. They are written directly into the server infrastructure." "Whose credentials were used to access the terminal?" Patrick said. Jonathan looked at him steadily. "Bryson Hallmark's intern login." The room was very still. "His intern access was suspended from elevator and building badge systems," Jonathan continued. "But the network credential suspension was processed separately, and there was a 72-hour gap in the deactivation sequence. His login was still technically active in the network system when these emails were generated." He turned back to the screen. "The guest terminal also falls within the coverage zone of the executive suite corridor camera system." Patrick looked at Madison. She was already looking at him. "I need outside counsel on the phone," Patrick said. "Right now." Jonathan was already reaching for his own phone. "I contacted them at 8 o'clock, he said. "They're on their way up." Outside counsel arrived on the 32nd floor at 8:31 a.m. Her name was Constance Aberley, and she moved through the door with the particular efficiency of a woman who had received an early morning call from a systems administrator and had immediately understood that her morning had changed. She was followed by two associates carrying laptops, and behind them, Warren Tillett, who had apparently decided that whatever Jonathan Brown had found was important enough to see in person. Jonathan presented his findings the same way he'd presented them to Patrick. Methodically, without drama, in complete sentences. He walked Constance through the authentication logs, the device signature discrepancy, the guest terminal access, and the credential identification. He put the timeline visualization on the largest monitor so everyone in the room could follow it. Constance listened without interrupting. Her associates typed steadily beside her. When Jonathan finished, she asked 4 precise questions. He answered all 4 without hesitation. She asked him to generate a formal forensic report documenting the methodology and findings suitable for submission to the board and, if necessary, to law enforcement. "I began drafting it at 7:30, Jonathan said, and turned his 4th monitor to show her the document already in progress. Constance looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Patrick. "We need the security footage from the executive suite corridor camera," she said. "Specifically, the coverage zone over the guest terminal workstation, for the timestamp window identified in the authentication logs." "I've already submitted the request to building security," Jonathan said. "The footage will be available within the hour." Warren Tillett, who had said nothing since entering the room, spoke for the first time. "Get me the footage the moment it arrives." The footage arrived at 9:44. It was clear. The camera angle was direct, positioned to cover the corridor and the guest terminal workstation as a security measure for the executive suite. The timestamp in the corner of the footage matched the authentication log window Jonathan had identified to within 40 seconds. The figure at the terminal was Bryson Hallmark. He was in his burgundy suit, the same suit, Patrick noted, that he wore to the office almost every day, as if it were a uniform. He sat at the guest terminal with his back partially to the camera, but his profile visible, his face angled toward the screen. He worked at the terminal for 22 minutes. The timestamp matched the window in which the 17 fabricated emails had been generated and sent. He had done it himself, not through an intermediary, not with technical help. Alone, on a guest terminal, using his own credentials he apparently believed had been fully deactivated, on a camera-covered workstation in a corridor he had walked through every day as an intern, and had apparently stopped seeing clearly. Constance watched the footage twice. Then she sat back and said nothing for a long moment. "He didn't tell his father," Tillett said quietly. It wasn't a question. "The timing is inconsistent with coordinated action," Constance said. "The emails were generated 36 hours after the board hearing. If Clifton had ordered this, there would have been more preparation, more sophistication. This was reactive." She paused. This was a 24-year-old who was angry and frightened and made a catastrophic decision. Patrick said nothing. He looked at the frozen footage on the monitor. Bryson's profile, his hands on the keyboard, the timestamp in the corner, and felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite sadness. Something more complicated. Something that had no clean name. "What are the criminal exposures?" Tillett asked. Constance counted them out. Fraudulent creation of corporate communications. Obstruction of a board governance proceeding. Unauthorized access to another employee's electronic accounts. Misuse of computer systems. She presented each one in the same flat, measured tone, as if she were reading a grocery list. "The evidence is airtight," she said at the end. "There is no alternative interpretation of the authentication logs and the footage that does not place Bryson Hallmark at that terminal generating those emails." Tillett looked at Patrick. "I owe you an apology for last night." "You were doing your job," Patrick said. "I should have—" "Warren." Patrick met his eyes steadily. "Let's keep moving." Tillett nodded. He straightened his jacket and turned to Constance. "Convene the full board. This afternoon." He looked at the monitor one more time, at Bryson's frozen profile, at the timestamp, at the terminal screen glowing in the corridor. "And get building security on standby." Constance was already dialing. Patrick looked at Madison across the room, She looked back at him with an expression that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Almost. The full board convened at 2 o'clock. All 11 members were present. The room had the particular quality of a space where something final is about to happen. Voices low, movements careful, the kind of collective stillness that descends when people understand that what occurs in the next hour will not be reversible. Constance Aberley sat at the foot of the table with her associates. Patrick sat where he had sat at the hearing. Head of the table, portfolio open, pen in hand. Desmond Ray, Clifton's personal attorney, was in the observer's chair again. But this time he had arrived 3 minutes late, and he had not made eye contact with anyone when he came through the door. Clifton himself was not present. He had been notified of the emergency session at 11 that morning. His attorney had confirmed receipt. Clifton had chosen not to attend, which told Patrick everything about what Clifton's attorney had told him in the 2 hours between notification and the start of the session. Justin Foss, Emery Waverly, and Howard Bradford, Clifton's 3 allies, sat in their usual seats. None of them had raised the quorum objection this morning. None of them had called Constance's office to challenge the session's legitimacy. They sat with the careful neutrality of people who had spent the last several hours quietly calculating which side of this they could afford to be on. The calculation had not taken long. Constance presented Jonathan's forensic report first. She walked the board through the authentication log findings, the device signature discrepancy, the guest terminal access, and the credential identification in the same methodical sequence Jonathan had used that morning. She put the timeline visualization on the room's presentation screen. Then she played the security footage, 22 seconds of it. Bryson at the terminal, profile visible, timestamp in the corner. Nobody spoke during those 22 seconds. Nobody moved. When the footage ended, Constance said, "The forensic evidence establishes, beyond any reasonable interpretation, that the document package submitted anonymously to outside counsel was fabricated by Bryson Hallmark using the firm's internal systems. The evidence is complete, documented, and reproducible." Desmond Ray shifted in his observer's chair. Constance continued. She walked through the criminal exposures, the same list she had recited for Tillett that morning, and noted that the firm's general counsel had already been in contact with the relevant authorities. She then re-entered the original evidence from the board hearing into the formal record. The falsified market analysis, the documented correction, the witness statements, the Division X materials, and Romina's page with Clifton's handwritten quote at the bottom. "Someone like Patrick." She read it aloud into the record without inflection, the way lawyers read things when they want the words themselves to do the work. Howard Bradford looked at the table. Justin Foss looked at the window. Emery Waverly looked at her hands. Warren Tillett called the vote at 2:47. The motion before the board is the permanent removal of Clifton Hallmark as Chief Executive Officer of Hallmark Capital, effective immediately. He looked down the table. Both sides of it. Justin Foss said, "Aye." Emery Waverly said, "Aye." Howard Bradford said, "Aye." The remaining 8 members voted in sequence, each one clean and clear. When the last vote was recorded, Constance's associate noted it in the formal minutes. 11-0. Tillett set his pen down. "The motion carries," he said. Clifton Hallmark is removed from the position of Chief Executive Officer, effective as of this moment. Building security was already on the floor when Bryson arrived at the building at 3:15. He had apparently spent the morning away from the building. His phone activity, reviewed later, suggested he had been at his father's private club, waiting for news that the board session had collapsed the way his father had told him it would. When the news didn't come, he had driven to the building himself. He came through the front doors in his burgundy suit, with the particular forward momentum of someone who still believed, despite all available evidence, that things were going to go his way. 2 members of building security met him at the lobby entrance. They were professional and quiet about it. They explained that he was being escorted from the premises and that he should expect to be contacted by outside counsel regarding the forensic findings. They did not raise their voices. They did not need to. Bryson stood in the lobby and looked at them for a moment. Really looked. The way you look when a reality you have refused to accept finally arrives in a form you cannot argue with. He walked out the way he came in. Through the front doors, past the security desk, onto the street. The same street Patrick had walked out onto 4 days ago, carrying a cardboard box, with Bryson's laughter still in his ears. Several staff members watched from the lobby windows. Nobody laughed. On the 35th floor, Odette Winter read the formal board announcement at her desk. She took off her reading glasses, set them down, pressed her hands flat on the desk, and closed her eyes for exactly 10 seconds. Then she put her glasses back on and pulled up the next item on the schedule. The building was quieter than usual the following morning. Not empty, Hallmark Capital did not stop running because its founder had been removed, but quieter in the way a room gets quieter after something loud has finally stopped. People moved through the corridors with a kind of careful attentiveness, the way people move when they are still processing something and haven't yet decided how to feel about it publicly. Patrick arrived at 7:50, same as every morning since his return. The security guard held the door. Odette had the coffee ready. The corner suite was exactly as he had left it the night before. Legal pads stacked, folders organized, the city spread out behind the glass in the early morning light. He sat down and opened his portfolio. At 8:15, Odette appeared in the doorway. "Warren Tillett is here," she said. "He has the general counsel with him." "Send them in." Tillett came in first, the way he always did. Measured, unhurried, the kind of man whose entrance never announced itself because it didn't need to. The general counsel, a careful woman named Miriam Oakley, who had been with the firm for 11 years and had navigated the last week with the quiet competence of someone who understood that her job was to protect the institution, no matter who was running it, followed him in. They sat across from Patrick's desk. Odette closed the door behind them and positioned herself in the chair along the wall, legal pad open, pen ready. Patrick had not needed to ask her to stay. She already knew. Tillett did not ease into it. "I want to start with an apology," he said. "A formal one, on behalf of this board. What happened to you last week? The termination, the manner of it, the speed of it, the complete absence of any proper investigation, was wrong. It should not have happened. This board should have caught it before it reached the point it reached, and we did not." He held Patrick's gaze. "I am sorry for that." Patrick nodded once. He accepted it without adding to it, which was the only dignified way to accept an apology from a man like Warren Tillett. "Now," Tillett said, "let me tell you what the board has authorized." Miriam Oakley opened her folder and walked through it in order. First, a complete and formal public exoneration. A written statement distributed to all staff by end of business today and released to the financial press simultaneously, explicitly clearing Patrick's name of every allegation made in Bryson's original complaint and every accusation implied by the fabricated email incident. The statement would name the allegations, address them factually, and confirm their falsity on the record. No corporate language softening. No passive constructions, clear, direct, and permanent. Second, full back pay for the period of wrongful termination. Every day from the morning he walked out with the box to the morning he walked back in as interim COO. Calculated at his regional manager's salary, paid within 5 business days. Third, the firm's legal team was authorized and directed to negotiate a formal settlement of Patrick's racial discrimination claim, the claim arising from Romina's documented note and the pattern of events surrounding the termination. The board would not contest it. Miriam said this plainly, without euphemism. "We will not fight this. We will settle it fairly and promptly." Patrick kept his expression neutral. Inside, something that had been held very tight for a very long time began, slowly, to release. Then Tillett leaned forward slightly. "The board wants to make you a permanent offer," he said. "Not interim. Permanent. He paused. "We want to create the position of Chief Operating Officer at Hallmark Capital. It has never existed here as a formal role. We want you to be the first person to hold it." He let that sit for a moment. Full executive authority over firm operations, an equity stake, meaningful, not symbolic, a permanent seat on the leadership committee with full voting rights, and a compensation package set at 40% above your prior salary as regional manager. Tillett folded his hands on the desk. "The role is yours to define. You would build it from the ground up. The board's expectation is that you will run this firm the way you have run every team you have ever managed here, with complete integrity and no tolerance for the kind of conduct we have just spent a week cleaning up." He sat back. "We'd like you to stay, Patrick. Permanently." The room was quiet. Patrick sat with it for a moment. He did not answer immediately, because the answer deserved more than immediacy. He thought about the parking garage, the box on the passenger seat, the termination letter folded on top of his coffee mug, Bryson in the hallway, pointing and laughing, performing for an audience of interns. Enjoy unemployment. He thought about Millie's kitchen table and Pauline awake at midnight asking the right question. He thought about Madison on a burner phone in a bathroom stall, and Jonathan Brown at his workstation at 6:45 in the morning, personally offended by what someone had done to his infrastructure. He thought about his mother, who had cleaned office buildings in this city so that he could one day work in one. "Yes," Patrick said. Miriam slid the offer letter across the desk. It was a single page, clean and direct, with a signature line at the bottom. Patrick picked up his pen, the same steady, unhurried motion he used for everything, and signed his name. Tillett extended his hand across the desk. Patrick shook it. "Welcome to the Leadership Committee," Tillett said. Outside the corner office windows, the city went about its morning, bright and indifferent and full of possibility. Odette closed her legal pad, stood up, and walked to the door. Just before she opened it, she turned back. "Shall I update your nameplate?" she said. Patrick looked at her. "Yes," he said. "You can take off the interim." The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Just barely. Just enough." She opened the door and went to take care of it. The nameplate went up at 11:23 a.m. Patrick watched Odette supervise the facilities man as he fixed the new plate beside the corner suite door. Brushed silver, clean lettering. Patrick Delson, Chief Operating Officer. No qualifier, no asterisk, no word that meant temporary or pending or subject to review. Just the name, just the title. Patrick stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at it. Then he went back inside and sat down at his desk. His first 2 official acts as permanent COO took 11 minutes. The first was a formal commendation entered into Madison Alberts' personnel file. A written record, signed by Patrick and countersigned by Miriam Oakley, documenting Madison's role in preserving the evidentiary record that had made the entire case possible. The commendation cited her professionalism, her integrity, and her courage in coming forward when the easier choice was silence. Patrick had written the first draft himself, longhand, before Odette typed the final version. The second was the creation of a new position, Deputy Director of Operations, a role that had not existed at Hallmark Capital before this morning. Patrick had drafted the job description the previous evening at his kitchen table, while Pauline read beside him and the house was quiet. The role carried full departmental authority, a significant salary increase, and a direct reporting line to the COO. He sent Madison the formal offer at 11:34. She appeared in his doorway at 11:41, holding her phone, looking at him with an expression that was trying very hard to stay composed and not entirely succeeding. "This is real?" she said. "It's in the system," Patrick said. "Miriam countersigned it 20 minutes ago." Madison looked at the offer on her phone one more time. Then she looked up. "Thank you," she said. Just that. 2 words. But she said them the way people say things when the words have to carry a lot of weight. "You earned it," Patrick said. "Go tell Odette to get you set up in the deputy director office down the hall." She nodded once and left. Patrick heard her and Odette exchange a brief, quiet conversation outside the door, and then heard Odette say, with the particular satisfaction of a woman who had been waiting a long time to say something, "Well, it's about time." The firm-wide exoneration statement went out at noon. Patrick read it at his desk. Not because he needed to verify the contents, he had reviewed the draft twice already, but because there was something he needed to see in the final form. The statement named the allegations from Bryson's complaint, addressed each one factually, and confirmed their falsity on the record in plain language that left no room for interpretation. It noted the board's unanimous vote. It confirmed Patrick's permanent appointment. He read it once, folded the printed copy, and put it in his desk drawer. At 12:15, Millie Oden called. "I saw the announcement," Millie said. His voice had the particular warmth of a man who has been right about something for a very long time. Chief Operating Officer, first person to hold that title at Hallmark Capital. A pause. "Your mother would have something to say about this." Patrick leaned back in his chair. "She would have told me I should have asked for 50% above." Millie laughed, a real, full laugh that filled the phone. "She would have been right," he said. "She usually was." They talked for 10 minutes, not about the case, not about Clifton or Bryson or the board, about other things, about Millie's garden, which was giving him trouble this year, about Pauline's school and the grant she'd been chasing for 18 months, about ordinary things, the kind that fill a life and make it worth protecting. When they said goodbye, Patrick sat quietly for a moment. He stayed late that evening. Not because there was a crisis, not because he was behind, simply because the work was his now, fully, permanently, without condition. And there was a particular satisfaction in sitting inside that fact and letting it settle. At 7:30, he began shutting down for the night. He straightened the legal pads, closed the folders, aligned the pen with the edge of the notepad the way he always had. He stood and lifted his briefcase from the floor beside the desk. Then he looked at the photograph Odette had placed on the corner of his desk that afternoon. Brought from home, his own choice, the one he'd mentioned to her without quite asking. His mother, standing in front of the Baltimore row house where he had grown up. She was wearing her work uniform, the light blue shirt with the cleaning company's logo on the chest, and she was squinting slightly into the sun, and she was smiling the smile of a woman who worked 2 jobs and raised a son alone, and did not consider either of these things remarkable. Patrick looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message was 3 words, followed by a period. Was it worth it? Patrick read it once. He stood at his desk in the quiet corner office, the city glowing gold and blue through the floor-to-ceiling glass behind him. The same city his mother had cleaned buildings in so that he could stand where he was standing right now. He put the phone in his pocket without replying. Some questions answered themselves. He picked up his briefcase, walked to the door, and turned off the light. The corridor outside was empty and clean, the overnight cleaning crew not yet arrived, the building holding its breath between one day and the next. Patrick walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened. He stepped in, turned to face forward, and watched the doors close on the corner office. On the nameplate, on the city view, on 17 years of earning ground that was finally, completely, and permanently his. The elevator moved. This time, he was going up. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.